To stand before the mirror law is to stand at the edge of a vast obsidian sea, where the ripples of the water are not caused by the wind, but by the very thoughts that flicker behind the veil of your eyes. For eons, humanity has moved through the world as a traveler in a strange land, convinced that the mountains, the rivers, and the faces of strangers are solid, independent entities that exist entirely outside the self. We have been taught to view reality as a rigid stage, a collection of cold, hard facts that we must navigate with grit and determination. Yet, hidden in the whispers of ancient mystery schools and the humming silence of the cosmos is a truth so profound it shatters the very foundations of our perceived helplessness. It is the realization that the world is not a stage, but a shimmering, liquid reflection. The universe is a grand, panoramic mirror of infinite depth, meticulously designed to bend its architecture around the central frequency of your internal state. This is not a metaphor for a positive attitude. It is a physical, metaphysical, and cosmic law of refraction that dictates the very geometry of your life. Imagine, if you will, the structure of a diamond. Its brilliance is not inherent to its carbon lattice alone, but to the way it catches, bends, and returns the light that strikes it. In much the same way, the external circumstances of your existence, your relationships, your financial ebbs and flows, and the very luck that seems to pursue or evade you are the refracted rays of your own interior sun. The ancient sages understood that the out there is a meticulously rendered shadow of the in here. When we look upon the world and see chaos, scarcity, or hostility, we are often like a child who, seeing their own scowling reflection in a silver basin, attempts to scrub the water to remove the frown. We spend lifetimes trying to manipulate the reflection, polishing the glass of our external lives, rearranging the furniture of our circumstances, and pleading with the shadows to change their shape. We fail to realize that the shadow is tethered to the light, and the light is governed by the source. The mirror law suggests that if you wish to see a different world, you do not move the mountains. You move the mountain within your own consciousness. This law possesses a practical significance that is both terrifying and liberating. It strips away the comfort of victimhood, revealing that we are not the passive recipients of a random and cruel fate, but the active architects of a responsive reality. To accept the mirror law is to accept a radical sovereignty over one's own existence. It implies that the hard reality we encounter is actually a malleable, holographic projection. If you feel trapped in a cycle of betrayal, the mirror is reflecting a fracture in your own self-trust. If you find yourself surrounded by abundance, the mirror is echoing your internal sense of worthiness and cosmic flow. The physical bending of reality occurs at the intersection of belief and observation. Just as a heavy object bends the fabric of space-time in the Einsteinian sense, a heavy, crystallized belief system bends the fabric of your personal experience, pulling into your orbit events and people that serve as perfect holographic matches for your internal state. We are walking magnets of resonance, constantly emitting a silent frequency that the universe is duty-bound to amplify and return. There is a deeper, almost cosmic dimension to this silver threshold. If the universe is a singular, conscious organism, then the mirror law is the mechanism by which that consciousness explores itself through the lens of individuality. You are the universe looking into a mirror of its own making. Every encounter you have is a conversation between different facets of the same infinite diamond. When you judge another, you are judging a discarded or hidden fragment of your own soul. When you fall in love, you are recognizing the divine beauty that you have finally allowed to bloom within yourself. The world is a vast feedback loop, a divine diagnostic tool designed to show you exactly where your light is blocked and where it is flowing freely. It is a system of perfect justice, though not in the moralistic sense we often imagine. It is a justice of frequency, a law of echoes. What you send out in the form of vibration, the universe returns in the form of form. To understand this is to move from being a victim of the reflection to becoming the master of the source. As we peel back the layers of this ancient wisdom, we begin to see that our entire life has been a series of holographic encounters designed to lead us back to the center of our own power. The mirror law is the hidden architecture of grace. It does not punish, it simply reveals. It shows us our scars so that we may heal them. It shows us our greatness so that we may inhabit it. We have been living in a dream of separation, believing that we are small and insignificant, while the very stars are rearranging themselves to reflect our most deeply held convictions. The bending of reality is not a miracle. It is the natural consequence of a universe that is fundamentally mental in nature. When we change the frequency of our internal broadcast, the holographic film of our life must, by law, change its imagery. We are the projectionists of our own cinematic experience, and the mirror law is the silver screen that refuses to lie. It is time to stop arguing with the screen and to start looking at the light coming from the projector of the heart. To venture deeper into the mirror law is to move beyond the awe of the threshold and into the study of its governing pillars. The first of these is the principle of radical correspondence, a law that suggests the macrocosm and the microcosm are not merely related, but are identical in their essential nature. In the ancient Hermetic traditions, this was whispered as above, so below, as within, so without. When we apply this to the physical bending of reality, we begin to understand that our internal world, the landscape of our subconscious beliefs, repressed emotions, and habitual thought patterns, acts as the blueprint for the external world. If the blueprint contains a flaw, the building will lean. If the internal world is fractured, the external world will present as a series of obstacles and conflicts. The mirror does not distinguish between what you want and what you are. It simply replicates the state of being you occupy in the present moment. Therefore, the first pillar of the mirror law is the realization that the world is a flawless diagnostic tool, a real-time report on the integrity of your internal alignment. The second pillar is the law of vibrational resonance, which serves as the physical mechanism for the bending of reality. We must understand that we are not solid bodies moving through a void, but localized disturbances in a vast, unified field of energy. Every thought and emotion carries a specific frequency, a signature that radiates outward into the quantum field. Just as a tuning fork will cause another of the same frequency to vibrate across a room, your internal state calls out to events and individuals that vibrate at the same pitch. This is where the physical bending occurs. The universe is a fluid, responsive medium that rearranges its probability waves to match the observer. When you hold a crystallized belief, such as the conviction that the world is a place of endless opportunity, you are essentially curving the space-time of your personal experience, creating a gravitational pull that draws opportune events toward you. Conversely, a state of fear creates a curvature that pulls in the very things you wish to avoid. Reality is not happening to you. It is being shaped by the gravitational mass of your habitual consciousness. A third guiding pillar is the concept of the shadow refraction. One of the most misunderstood aspects of the mirror law is why we often encounter negative experiences despite our best efforts to think positively. The answer lies in the subconscious, the hidden 90% of the iceberg that sits below the waterline of our awareness. The mirror law reflects the entire self, not just the curated persona we present to the world. If we harbor deep-seated feelings of unworthiness that we have buried under layers of forced optimism, the mirror will ignore the words we speak and reflect the energy we feel. This is why our enemies and our greatest irritations are often our most profound teachers. They are the personifications of our own repressed shadows, reflecting back to us the parts of ourselves we have judged, denied, or cast out. The bending of reality in this context is an act of cosmic healing. The universe is constantly trying to bring us back to wholeness by presenting us with the fragmented pieces of our own soul, disguised as external problems. Interwoven with these pillars is the illusion of the linear cause. In our standard three-dimensional worldview, we believe that we must act upon the world to change it. We believe in the hard causality of the hammer and the nail. The mirror law, however, reveals a soft or lateral causality. It suggests that by shifting the internal cause, the external effect must follow as a matter of law, often in ways that defy linear logic. This is the bending that feels like magic to the uninitiated. When an individual undergoes a profound internal transformation, forgiving a long-held grievance or stepping into a new sense of authority, the external world often rearranges itself overnight. People who were once hostile become helpful. Doors that were locked suddenly swing open. This is not because the individual did something different in the physical world, but because they changed the frequency of the reflection. The lateral shift in consciousness creates a lateral shift in the holographic projection of reality. Finally, we must consider the pillar of temporal lag and the test of persistency. The physical world is denser than the mental world, and thus there is often a delay between the internal shift and the external reflection. This lag is a vital part of the cosmic architecture. It prevents every fleeting whim or dark thought from manifesting instantly, which would result in absolute chaos. This delay serves as a filtering mechanism, requiring the individual to maintain a new state of being until it becomes a stable frequency. Many fail to master the mirror law because they change their internal state for a day, see no external change, and then return to their old patterns, thus reconfirming the old reflection. Mastering the law requires the sovereign understanding that the reflection must follow the source. The lag is merely the time it takes for the dense materials of the physical world to reorganize themselves around the new, curved path of your consciousness. By recognizing these core pillars, we begin to see that our sovereignty is not found in controlling others, but in the disciplined management of our own internal broadcast. We move from being a victim of the weather of our lives to becoming the climate itself. The mirror law is the ultimate school of responsibility, teaching us that every encounter, every joy, and every sorrow is a data point in the grand map of our own becoming. We are the conductors of an invisible symphony, and the world is the orchestra that is duty-bound to play the score we provide. As we move from the study of these pillars into the realm of deeper symbolic narratives, we will see how this law has been illustrated throughout history as a journey toward the center of the self, where the mirror finally becomes transparent, and the observer and the observed are revealed to be one. To understand the mirror law is to walk through the gate of myth, where the dry mechanics of vibration are given a breath of life through the power of the story. Imagine, if you will, a traveler who discovers a legendary palace known as the Hall of the Obsidian King. The walls of this palace are made of a stone so dark and so polished that they act as a perfect, uninterrupted mirror. The traveler enters, seeking the king to ask for a favor, but the king is nowhere to be seen. Instead, the traveler sees 1,000 versions of himself. When the traveler enters with a sword drawn, fearful of an ambush, the obsidian walls reflect 1,000 armed men, all pointing their blades at his heart. Terrified, he strikes at the nearest reflection, only to find that he has shattered the glass and cut his own hand. He screams in rage, and the palace screams back with the force of 1,000 voices. This is the allegory of the reactive soul. The traveler is the average human being, moving through the world with a blade of defensive expectations, constantly fighting the very reflections he has created, and wondering why the king of his fate has abandoned him to such a hostile court. Eventually, the traveler collapses in exhaustion and drops his sword. In the silence of his surrender, he looks at the walls again. He sees a tired, wounded man, but because he is no longer attacking, the reflections are no longer threatening. He begins to weep for his own pain, and for the first time, the 1,000 men in the walls weep with him, creating a vast, shimmering ocean of shared compassion. This is the moment of subconscious realignment. The traveler realizes that the Obsidian King is not a person sitting on a throne, but the very stone of the palace itself, a silent, impartial observer that can only return what is presented to it. The favor he sought was always in his own hands. By changing his posture, he changed the nature of the kingdom. The palace did not move, but the reality within it bent entirely around the traveler's shift from aggression to vulnerability. The world is this obsidian palace, and our habitual emotions are the weapons or the flowers we carry into its halls. Consider another symbolic narrative, that of the weaver and the tapestry of echoes. In a distant realm, it is said that the goddess of reality sits at a great loom, but she has no thread of her own. Instead, she reaches into the hearts of mortals and pulls out the colors of their deepest convictions to weave the fabric of their lives. A man who believes the world is a cold, barren desert provides the goddess with threads of gray and brown. Consequently, his life becomes a landscape of dust and scarcity. He looks at the tapestry and says, "See, I was right. The world is a desert." He does not realize that the goddess was merely following his lead. Another woman provides threads of gold and emerald, for she sees the world as a garden of hidden opportunities. The goddess weaves for her a life of lush abundance and unexpected beauty. This allegory illustrates the holographic feedback loop. The mirror law is the goddess at the loom. She does not judge the quality of the thread, she simply weaves the pattern that the thread demands. To change the tapestry, one must stop complaining about the gray and start cultivating the gold within the secret chambers of the heart. There is a final, more intimate story regarding the mystery of the twin well. It is told that there are two wells in the center of the soul, the well of memory and the well of projection. Most people drink from the well of memory, which is filled with the bitter waters of past failures, betrayals, and the hard facts of their history. When they look into the world, they see these memories reflected back as current reality, thus drinking again from the same bitter source. This is the cycle of the linear prisoner. However, the sage drinks from the well of projection. This well is filled with the pure, clear water of what could be. When the sage drinks, they project an image of harmony and power into the mirror of the world. Even if the world is currently reflecting a storm, the sage remains focused on the clear water they have swallowed. Slowly, the physical world, being a fluid and responsive medium, begins to calm. The ripples of the sage's internal peace bend the external storm until the reflection matches the water of projection. The world is not a history book. It is a live broadcast, and the mirror law ensures that the latest update from your internal well is always what is displayed on the screen of your life. These stories serve to remind us that the bending of reality is an act of internal artistry. We are not fighting a world of stone. We are interacting with a world of liquid light that is waiting for us to define its shape. The Obsidian King, the Weaver, and the Twin Wells are all different ways of describing the same fundamental truth, that the universe is an echo chamber of the self. The mirror law is the highest law of the simulator, for it ensures that every being eventually becomes the master of their own experience by showing them the consequences of their own vibration. As we move into the practical integration of these insights, we must carry the awareness that we are the protagonists of a mythic journey, where every obstacle is a mirror and every breakthrough is a refractive shift in the light of our own soul. To transition from the mythic halls of obsidian into the pulsating rhythm of the mundane is to begin the work of the active refractor. We have established that reality is not a solid wall, but a liquid screen, and we have seen through the eyes of the weaver that the threads of our experience are pulled from the reservoir of our own hearts. Now, we must address the practical labor of maintaining this sovereignty within a world that constantly invites us to react to its distortions. The first and most essential practice in the real-world application of the mirror law is the cultivation of the non-reactive gap. In the heat of a conflict, or in the face of a sudden financial lack, our biological instinct is to strike back at the reflection, to shout at the obsidian wall. However, the master of the mirror understands that to react to the external circumstance is to lock it into place. By reacting, you send a signal to the universe that the reflection is real, thereby sustaining the very vibration that created the problem. Practical mastery begins in the second of silence before the reaction, where you consciously choose to treat the external event as a ghost of a past frequency, refusing to feed it with new energy. This leads us to the practice of assumptive architecture, the art of building a new internal world while the old reflection is still fading. Because of the temporal lag inherent in the density of our reality, there will always be a period where your external life does not yet match your internal shift. During this phase, the sovereign individual must become a dreamer with open eyes. This involves the disciplined act of feeling the reality you wish to inhabit, even as your physical senses report the presence of the old storm. If you seek abundance, you must find the frequency of sufficiency in a single breath or a glass of water, magnifying that internal feeling until it becomes the dominant signal of your field. You are essentially pre-bending the light of the future. The real-world takeaway is that the universe does not respond to your need, which is a frequency of lack, but to your assumption, which is a frequency of possession. By assuming the state of the wish fulfilled, you create the gravitational curvature that forces the holographic world to rearrange its atoms to accommodate your new mass. Furthermore, we must integrate the practice of shadow integration as life refinement. When we encounter a person who triggers a deep, jagged irritation within us, the mirror law invites us to move from judgment to inquiry. Instead of attempting to change the other person, we look into the mirror they provide and ask, what part of my own soul am I seeing here? Often, the person is reflecting a quality we have suppressed or a judgment we have held against ourselves. By blessing the trigger, we reclaim the energy we had previously projected outward. In the real world, this looks like a profound shift in interpersonal dynamics. When you find the seed of the irritation within yourself and bring it into the light of your own compassion, the external person often undergoes a spontaneous transformation or simply drifts out of your experience. The bending of the relationship occurs because you have removed the internal hook that was snagging the external thread. You are no longer vibrationally compatible with the conflict, and thus, the conflict can no longer find a foothold in your reality. Another vital takeaway is the sanctity of the internal broadcast, which involves the conscious curation of the information and environments we inhabit. If the mind is the projector, then the images we feed it, through media, social circles, and habitual self-talk, become the film of our lives. The mirror law reminds us that there is no such thing as idle consumption. Every story you believe about the world becomes a law for your own experience. To master the law, one must become a fierce guardian of the internal sanctuary, refusing to entertain narratives of helplessness or collective despair. This is not escapism, but the strategic management of the refractive source. By focusing your attention on the geometry of the beautiful, on patterns of growth, resilience, and divine order, you ensure that the mirror has high-quality light to reflect. Your practical success in the world is directly proportional to your ability to maintain a coherent internal signal amidst the white noise of the collective's chaotic reflections. Finally, we must consider the ritual of the living gratitude. Gratitude is not merely a social grace, it is a technical tool for bending reality. When you express genuine gratitude for what is already present, you are telling the mirror, "This frequency is good. Give me more of this." It is a confirmation signal that stabilizes a positive reflection. In your daily life, this looks like the intentional acknowledgement of the small wins and the hidden graces. By focusing on the clear water in the twin well, you cause that water to expand. The mirror law is a relentless multiplier. It takes whatever you give your focused attention to and grows it into a forest. Thus, the most practical way to change your life is to change what you choose to notice. You are the director of photography for the film of your existence, and where you point the lens is exactly where the universe will pour its concrete. As we move toward the final conclusion of this exploration, we realize that the mirror law is the ultimate path to freedom, because it places the steering wheel of the universe firmly back in our own hands. We are no longer waiting for the world to be kind so that we can feel good. We are feeling good so that the world must reflect kindness. We are moving from the role of the reflected to the role of the reflector. In the final section, we will bridge these practical tools into a singular, transformational call, recognizing that the mirror is finally becoming a window, a way for the soul to step through the glass and into the light of its own infinite nature. We have journeyed through the obsidian halls of the reactive self, deciphered the pillars of vibrational resonance, and learned the gritty alchemy of the active refractor. Now, we arrive at the final precipice of this exploration, where the mirror is no longer seen as a barrier or even a tool, but as a bridge to the ultimate realization of our own divinity. The ancient mirror law is the final school of the soul, a curriculum designed to lead the individual from the infantile state of a victim, crying out against the cruelty of a stone world, to the maturity of a cosmic co-creator who understands that the stone is actually the solidified breath of their own spirit. To watch this before it's scrubbed is to witness the dissolution of the greatest lie ever told, the lie of separation. The final transformation occurs when you realize that the mirror was never a piece of glass outside of you, but the very boundary of your own consciousness. You are the mirror, you are the reflection, and you are the light that makes the vision possible. The transformational call of this law is an invitation to inhabit a state of radical presence. If reality bends around you like a fluid medium, then your only true responsibility is the quality of the now you provide as the source. We have spent lifetimes looking for the exit from our problems, searching for a door in the physical world that would lead us to peace. The mirror law reveals that the door is a frequency, not a location. To transform your life is to turn the gaze inward and find the place within you that is already at peace, already abundant, and already free. When you anchor yourself in that internal still point, the holographic film of the world has no choice but to settle into a new geometry of harmony. This is the ultimate reality shift. Not a movement through space, but a movement through the octaves of your own being. You are the architect of the curvature of your existence, and every breath is an opportunity to redraw the blueprints of your destiny. To live as a master of the mirror is to walk through the world with a luminous detachment. You no longer take the shadows of the world personally. When you see conflict, poverty, or discord on the screen of your life, you do not meet it with judgment or resistance. You meet it with the curiosity of the alchemist. You look into the shadow and ask, what frequency is this calling me to refine within myself? The world becomes a sacred dialogue, a constant conversation between you and the infinite. You become the obsidian king who has finally realized that the 1,000 men in the walls are his own many-faceted self, waiting to be loved back into wholeness. This is the path of the integrator, the one who uses the mirror law to reclaim every fragmented piece of their own light, until the mirror itself becomes transparent. When there is no more conflict within, the mirror ceases to reflect conflict without, and the seeker finally steps through the glass and into a reality of unconditioned radiance. The urgency of this message lies in the fact that the collective mirror of humanity is currently reflecting a period of intense fragmentation and noise. The noise-based society thrives on our reaction to the reflection. It feeds on the energy we expend trying to fix the shadows. To reclaim your sovereignty is to stop feeding the shadows and to start feeding the source. You are a primary broadcaster in a universe that is listening with bated breath for your unique signal. By choosing the frequency of love, clarity, and sovereign power, you are not just changing your own life, you are bending the collective reality toward a more harmonious expression. You are a knot of resonance in the universal web, and as you untie the knots of fear within yourself, the entire web begins to relax. This is the secret work of the hidden masters, to be the silent center around which a new world begins to reflect itself. Go forth now, not as a traveler in a strange land, but as the owner of the house who has finally found the keys. Carry the reflective wisdom in your heart and the assumptive architecture in your mind. The mirror is no longer your master. It is your faithful servant, duty-bound to show you the magnificence of what you have chosen to become. The scrubbing of the truth can never reach the one who has become the truth. You are the observer who bends the light, the weaver who provides the gold, and the sage who drinks from the clear well of the future. The universe is a shimmering, liquid prayer, and you are the one who provides the words. Stand tall before the obsidian wall, drop your blade, and look with eyes of love. The palace is waiting for its king to finally recognize himself. The world is waiting for your song.